The night before my mother's will was read, her doctor pulled me aside in the hospital hallway and said, "Claire, what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room." I remember thinking he was going to apologize for missing something, for the way she went so fast, so quietly, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and old flowers. I remember thinking a lot of things in that half second before he spoke again. I was not prepared for what he actually said. My mother was not a dramatic woman. She kept her hair short and practical, drove the same Ford Escape for 11 years, and believed that a good pot of coffee solved most problems. She grew up in Harlan County, Kentucky, married my father at 22, buried him at 51, and after that she just kept going. That was the thing about her. She just kept going. Her name was Ruth. People who loved her called her Ruthie. I am Claire. I am 31 years old. I am a licensed insurance fraud investigator, which means I spend most of my working hours looking at documents that don't add up and asking questions people don't want to answer. My brother used to joke that I turned suspicion into a career because I was born suspicious. He said it like it was a flaw. I think about that now. My brother's name is Daniel. He is 3 years older than me, lives 40 minutes from where we grew up, and married a woman named Sasha 6 years ago. Sasha has very good taste in furniture and very little patience for people she considers beneath her. She tolerated me the way you tolerate a draft. Something cold you acknowledge but don't address directly. My mother loved Daniel the way mothers sometimes love their firstborn. Completely, a little blindly in ways they don't even notice themselves. She loved me too, but differently, more like an equal. She told me hard truths. She asked my opinion on things. When I was 26 and got passed over for a promotion I deserved, she said, "Then go somewhere they can see you," and she meant it. I went somewhere they could see me. I am telling you this so you understand. My mother and I did not have a complicated relationship. We had a clear one. And clear things, when they shatter, leave very sharp edges. She started getting sick 14 months before she died. It began with fatigue, then nausea she blamed on a new blood pressure medication, then a kind of foggy confusion that she described on the phone as my brain being slow today. I drove up twice in the fall to see her. Both times she looked thinner than the month before. Both times she said she was fine. In January, she fell in the kitchen. Daniel called me. Not to panic, he said, just to let me know. She had bruised her hip. Nothing broken. She was okay. He and Sasha were handling it. He used that word. Handling. I said I wanted to come up. He said there was no need, that it would only stress her out to have everyone hovering. I pushed back. He pushed back harder. I drove up anyway that weekend and found my mother sitting in her recliner with a blanket over her lap in a living room that had been rearranged. Her bookshelves were different. The furniture was moved. Small things. But they were her things, and they were not where she put them. She said Daniel and Sasha had helped her organize. She said it like she was repeating a phrase someone had handed her. In March, she was admitted to Mercy General with what they were calling acute kidney deterioration. She was 67 years old and had no prior kidney problems. Her nephrologist, Dr. Aldridge, told us it was not uncommon in women her age, and he said it gently, the way doctors say things that they want to feel gentle. I asked about causes. He listed several. I wrote them all down. She spent 11 days in the hospital. During that time, Daniel and Sasha were there every day. They brought her things. They spoke to the nurses. They sat on either side of her bed and held her hands, and when I arrived on the 4th day, I felt like I was visiting someone else's mother. She died on a Tuesday morning in April. Daniel called me at 6:42 a.m. He was crying. He said she went in her sleep. He said it was peaceful. I drove 2.5 hours in the rain, and when I got to the hospital, the room had already been cleaned. Her things were in a plastic bag. The bed was stripped. I stood in that bare room for a long time. I don't know what I was looking for. Some proof that she had been there. Some proof that she was gone. The will was scheduled to be read 3 days after the funeral at the office of her attorney, a man named Gerald Pratt, who had handled my parents' documents for 20 years. The funeral was on a Thursday. My mother was buried next to my father in a cemetery outside of town, under a sky that couldn't decide between gray and white. Sasha wore a dress that was not quite black. I noticed because I noticed things, and because I had nothing else to hold on to. That night, after the reception at Daniel's house, after the casseroles and the condolences and the long silences between people who didn't know what to say, I went back to my mother's house to sleep. I had a key. I had always had a key. I had always had a key. I don't know what made me go to her bedroom desk. Grief, maybe. The need to be close to her handwriting. She kept a small wooden box on the left side of the desk, where she put things she considered important, warranties, birthday cards, receipts she didn't know why she kept but couldn't throw away. The box was there, but it had been opened recently. I could tell because she kept a folded piece of paper on top as a kind of liner, and it was not folded the way she folded things. My mother had a way of folding paper that was almost architectural. This was just crumpled and flattened back down. Inside the box, most things were as I expected. But the copy of her will, which she had shown me 2 years ago, which had left the house and her savings equally between Daniel and me, was gone. In its place was a sticky note in my mother's handwriting that said, "Ask Gerald. He has the new one." I stood there for a long time holding that sticky note. New one. The next morning I called Dr. Aldridge before the will reading. I told him I was Ruth Mercer's daughter and that I had some questions about her case. He was polite but careful. He said he couldn't discuss much without a formal records request. I said I understood. Then I asked him, casually, whether acute kidney deterioration of that speed was ever associated with external causes. There was a pause. He said, "Ms. Mercer, I'd like to ask you to come in." I said I could be there in an hour. I was there in 45 minutes. He closed his office door, which told me something before he said a word. He sat down across from me and he looked at his hands for a moment, and then he looked at me and he said, "Your mother's blood work from her final week showed elevated heavy metal markers that I dismissed at the time as consistent with her medications. I should not have dismissed them. I've been reviewing her case since her death, and I filed a flag with the hospital's quality review board 2 days ago. But I think you need to know." I asked him what kind of heavy metals. He said thallium. I knew what thallium was. In my line of work, you read a lot of cases. Thallium is odorless, tasteless. It accumulates. It looks at first like a lot of other things. I asked him if he had reported it to anyone outside the hospital. He said not yet. He said he wanted to speak to the family first. I told him to call the police before he spoke to anyone else. I told him I would follow up within the hour. I walked out of his office and sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and did not cry. I did not cry because crying would have taken up time. I did not have. The will reading was at 2 o'clock. Gerald Pratt's office was small and smelled like old paper and central heating. Daniel and Sasha were already seated when I arrived. Sasha had her hands folded in her lap. Daniel looked like he hadn't slept, or like he hadn't slept too much. I couldn't tell which. Gerald Pratt read the new will in the same measured tone he would have used to read a grocery list. My mother had amended it 8 weeks before her death. The house and the entirety of her savings, which totaled just over $400,000, were left to Daniel. I received her jewelry in a sum of $15,000 described as a token of love and gratitude. Daniel did not look at me while this was read. Sasha's hand stayed very still in her lap. I asked Gerald when my mother had come in to sign the amendment. He said she had not come in. He said it had been handled remotely via notarized documentation because her health made travel difficult. I asked who had arranged that. He looked slightly uncomfortable and said that my brother had coordinated on her behalf. I said, "And you spoke to her directly? You confirmed her wishes?" He said there had been a phone call. Yes. I said, "I'd like a copy of everything, the amendment, the notarization, the documentation of that phone call." He looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the table. I said, "Gerald, I'm going to need those documents. Today." I had been quietly working cases for 9 years. The thing people don't understand about fraud investigation is that the hardest part is never finding the evidence. The hardest part is the moment before you find it, when you still have the option to look away. When the person you're about to prove guilty is someone whose face you know. I called a colleague named Marcus that evening, someone I trusted more than anyone in the field. I explained the situation. He connected me with a detective at the county sheriff's office named Paulson who handled financial crimes. I sent Paulson the documents from Gerald's office. I told him about Dr. Aldridge. I told him about the sticky note. Then I drove back to my mother's house and I went through every room. Sasha and Daniel had been the ones organizing since January. I had not been paying enough attention to what that meant. In the kitchen, I found the cabinet under the sink had been recently cleaned, not the way my mother cleaned things, which was thorough but not obsessive, but the way someone cleans when they are removing something rather than removing dirt. The trash can liner had been replaced recently enough that there was no smell and no residue, just the faint chemical edge of something synthetic. I photographed everything: the cabinet, the rearranged shelves, the sticky note, which I had already placed in a plastic bag, the spot on the windowsill where my mother's medication bottles usually sat. I knew because she had shown me once, organized by day of the week, because she was meticulous about that kind of thing. The bottles were there, but one of them, a supplement she had apparently started taking in November, was a brand I had never seen her use before. I photographed the label. I photographed the batch number. 3 weeks later, a toxicology report confirmed thallium poisoning as a contributing cause of my mother's death. The source was traced to a supplement, the same one I had photographed, which had been purchased online under a name that took investigators 4 days to trace back to a credit card in Sasha's maiden name. 4 weeks after that, Daniel and Sasha were arrested at their home at 6:45 in the morning. Daniel did not resist. The neighbors later told me they saw him sit down on the front steps of his house while the officers waited, and that he sat there for a long time, looking at nothing. Sasha said nothing. She was wearing a silk robe. She looked, according to one of the officers who later filed the report, like she was waiting for someone to apologize to her. The notarized amendment to my mother's will was ruled invalid. The signature had been obtained under what investigators determined was undue influence. My mother had been cognitively impaired by that point, a fact confirmed by medical review of her records in the final weeks before she signed. Gerald Pratt faced a separate review by the state bar for failing to verify competency in person. He retired shortly after. The financial records showed that Daniel and Sasha had also transferred $22,000 from my mother's savings account between October and March, moving it in increments small enough to avoid automatic bank flags. They were charged with financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult in addition to the primary charge. The trial lasted 9 days. I sat in the second row every single day. I wore my mother's watch, a small silver thing she had gotten from my grandmother, nothing expensive, just something she kept meaning to get a new battery for and never did. I had put a new battery in it the week after she died. I don't know why. It just felt like something that should be working. Daniel pled not guilty. His attorney argued that the thallium exposure could have been accidental, that the supplement was legally purchased, that the will amendment had been my mother's genuine wish. The prosecutor methodically dismantled each argument. The supplement dosage, administered over weeks, was not accidental. The timing of the will amendment, 8 weeks before her death, correlated precisely with the period of maximum cognitive impairment. The financial transfers had begun 2 months before my mother ever complained of feeling unwell. On the 7th day, the prosecutor called me to the stand. I had testified in civil cases before, but never anything like this. She asked me about my mother. She asked me what Ruth Mercer was like before November. I told the truth. I said she was the kind of woman who folded paper with precision and drove the same car for 11 years and told you hard truths because she respected you enough not to soften them. I did not cry on the stand. I had already decided I wouldn't. I cried in my car afterward, alone in the courthouse parking garage for a long time. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on all counts for both Daniel and Sasha. Daniel received 22 years. Sasha received 18. The judge noted before sentencing that the premeditation involved was not impulsive or sudden. It was patient, calculated, and cruel in a way that the court was not inclined to view leniently. My mother's estate was returned to its original distribution following the invalidation of the amended will. I did not keep most of the money. I set up a small fund in her name through the local hospital to support patients who cannot afford home care coordination. The kind of support that, had someone offered it to her, might have meant she was never alone with them long enough for this to happen. I kept the house. I haven't decided yet what to do with it. For now, I go back sometimes, on weekends. I make coffee in her kitchen. I sit in her chair. I look at the bookshelves, which I put back the way she had them. I remembered, because I had noticed when they were wrong. That is the thing about paying attention. It is exhausting and it is relentless, and sometimes it costs you things you cannot get back. But sometimes it is the only reason the truth survives at all. If you are watching this and something feels wrong, a parent who seems confused, a sibling who is suddenly very helpful in ways they weren't before, a document you were told about but never shown, please pay attention to that feeling. I am not saying everyone is a Daniel. I am saying my mother trusted someone because she was supposed to be able to. I am saying that trust, without anyone checking on it, left her without protection at the moment she needed it most. She deserved better. She was Ruthie. She just kept going, right up until someone made sure she couldn't. I am still going. I intend to keep going for a long time, and I am watching very carefully now. I used to think that paying attention was just part of my job, something I turned on at the office and left there when I went home. I did not understand until my mother was gone that attention is not a professional skill. It is a moral one. Daniel and Sasha did not become who they were overnight. That is the part that stays with me, even now, when I sit in my mother's kitchen with a cup of coffee and the morning quiet. They became who they were slowly, across years of small choices. A little more greed here, a little more contempt there, a willingness to look at a woman they were supposed to love and calculate what she was worth to them. Dead versus alive. That kind of rot doesn't arrive suddenly. It builds. And it builds precisely because people around it keep finding generous explanations for the smell. I was not exempt from that. I noticed things and I talked myself out of them. The rearranged bookshelves. The way my mother repeated phrases that didn't sound like her. The organized cabinet under the sink. I noticed and I deferred because Daniel said he was handling it and because I did not want to be the kind of person who suspects her own family without proof. I understand now that waiting for proof before you trust your instincts is sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do. What Daniel and Sasha did had a logic to it that I have had to sit with for a long time. They wanted something. They felt entitled to it. And when the direct path was blocked, my mother's love for fairness, her intention to divide things equally, they found another path. They were patient. They were careful. And they nearly got away with it, because patience and carefulness, and people who mean well, look like devotion. The consequences they are living now are not punishment handed down from somewhere outside themselves. They are the direct result of what they chose to build. They built a plan on cruelty and deception, and it held up, until it didn't. And when it collapsed, it took everything with it. Their freedom, their standing, whatever version of themselves they had managed to believe in. That is the weight of that kind of choice. It doesn't just cost you the outcome you wanted, it costs you the person you could have been. I think about my mother. I think about what it means that she left that sticky note, even in those final weeks, even when her mind was slipping. Some part of her knew something was wrong. Some part of her was still trying to tell me. She had spent 67 years building the kind of character that does not go quietly, and it didn't. It left a note on folded paper in a wooden box and it waited for me to find it. That is what I want to carry forward. Not the grief, though the grief is real and it is not finished. Not even the anger, though I earned it. I want to carry forward the part of her that kept going. The part that told hard truths and trusted people to be strong enough to hear them. The part that noticed when something was wrong and did not pretend otherwise to keep the peace. She deserved someone paying close enough attention to protect her. I intend to be that person now, for myself, for anyone I love, for as long as I am able to.